I call it 1812 Visions and Nightmares because, like all visions, sometimes it doesn't work out too well. And visions have a tendency to change and alter, and then before we know it, we're in trouble. The other thing we got to remember is there was a whole series of visions that were taking place prior to 1812. It just wasn't Tecumseh and his brother, but a whole lot of stuff going on in both the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee communities. And each one of these visionaries brought in kind of a similar but distinctly different message. All I can say is our people were probably thoroughly confused. Imagine if for one community, all of a sudden you got this visionary saying this, and this one saying this, and this one saying that. Which path are you going to choose? Whose vision are you going to be living? I put at the bottom Duncan Campbell Scott because he was the superintendent of Indian Affairs for a number of years. He had a vision for us that, tell you the truth, most of us are living. Because he wanted the day to come when we would all be speaking English, eating their food, and their style of meeting, all being recorded by technology. The Delaware prophet's vision was very interesting because there are some things that Alan mentioned too that underlie all these visions. And basically you can say they were all visions about decolonizing yourself. Get rid of those bad habits now that have hurt our people. As an example, we have to stop drinking. But get this, reject European goods and materialism. That means your cell phone. Abandon dependency on a settler lifestyle. No more shopping at Walmart. And return to a traditional lifestyle. End this evil collusion with the alien white man. And at the same time, have respectful monogamous relationships. Well, some of us haven't been too good at that. So the Delaware prophet also says to use no other weapon but a bow and arrow. And then when shaking hands, this is interesting. This is the way white people shake hands. He says, this is the way we should shake hands with our left, just to be contrary, but also because it's a way of noting that you're giving your heart along with your hands. So for the rest of the day, shake hands with the left hand, see if that works. But the Delaware prophet often talked about the devil. The devil was waiting for us. They said he had a little book with some drawings in it, and there was a man who was captured by the Delaware in 1808. He showed this drawing, and this is where this vision of hell kind of came to our people as well. Without explaining the whole thing, what I'm getting at is, there was some colonized visions, some native visions, all of it kind of mixed in together because our world was upside down, 1808 to 1812. We weren't quite sure where we were going to fall. And this particular vision basically says there's some people who are going to go direct to heaven. Those are all of the people named Hill. And then the rest of you are going to go to hell. So it was the Creator's wish. Now get this. This is what he said the Creator wanted. Drive them away, wage war against them. I love them not, they know me not. They are my enemies, they are your brother's enemies. Send them back to the land that I've made for them. That's a pretty specific vision. So all of you of the Caucasian persuasion have to vacate the tent right after I'm speaking. We're also celebrating in this other anniversary that you just mentioned now. Does anybody know who this is? Pontiac. It's interesting, both in the War of 1812 and Pontiac, nobody actually knew what he looked like, so we kind of make up a picture of what he probably looked like. So there's Pontiac, who gets commemorated in Canada by this weird-looking stamp, and I can't tell you the year that it came out. But unfortunately, big historic events get scrunched down for popular consumption, but sometimes we forget what the event was really about. And so they're an attempt to acknowledge kind of a native cultural attribute, we lose sight of what it actually was. Pontiac's vision is very important to understand. Now, Pontiac waged this big fight against the British. They were considered our enemies then. He says the master of life, the guy upstairs, wants to drive the British out of our land. He organized this coalition of people. Even though his vision was based upon that of the Delaware prophet, the prophet changed his and said, oh, I didn't mean war. So I don't know how we were supposed to remove them without war. But anyways, this resulted in the treaty that he's talking about then in 1764. And I just noticed this wampum over here from Tecumseh has 24 strings on it. It's very interesting because it could be those 24 nations who were at Fort Niagara. So Tecumseh kind of gets remade in Pontiac's mold. Look at these two images. They're almost exactly alike. The color one is that, again, supposed to be Pontiac. And then one a little bit more famous about Tecumseh. But something about our leaders, apparently they can't talk to white man without threatening to kill him. Maybe it's something we should revive in Ottawa. In 1798, there was also a Mohawk prophet at Six Nations. And he talked about, again, receiving this message from above. But he said, it's our fault. because we have forgot what the Creator gave us. And so this is why we're suffering all of this hard times. If we revive our ancient ceremonies, like we used to sacrifice this white dog because it was considered the Creator's favorite food, we're also not supposed to drink, have this universal love, and just kind of live peacefully at home because chaos was breaking out. At the same time, he said, much like the Delaware prophet though, we must follow the words of the Bible. So I can't get too upset with some of my Christian relatives because in many ways they were following what they considered to be the only path to salvation. We had another prophet among us, and among the Senecas, his name was Handsome Lake Scanadayo. He also told us to give up alcohol, create strong families, and end the abuse that was going on and return to the ceremonies. But he said we could have a little garden and raise livestock like the white people, and you could cultivate the fields like them. And maybe you want to send a few of your kids to school, but more importantly, he said, don't fight in the white man's war, because we're going to lose. What was the War of 1812? Was that a white man's war, or was it our war? So it's very interesting to see, but imagine he's saying this to people just a few years before the war broke out. And the other thing he said is, great changes are coming if people don't correct their bad behaviors. On my right here in the morning in the early fog, I saw these big windmills, big tall white things. In 1799, Hanson Lake said, the day's going to come when there's going to be this big white machine in the sky, we thought rotating around, and it's going to change the course of the wind. It's going to deplete the energy of the wind. So when I saw them on my way here, I thought, Hanson Lake was right. And then we talked about the Tecumseh's brother. But we have to understand, like you mentioned, they're two different people, but their visions influenced each other and influenced us. But let's take a look at what he said. To cleanse ourselves of the corruption the white man brought, we have to stop wearing this white man's clothing and turn back to our leather clothes. Now, I hate to say this, especially after eating at lunch. We're not supposed to eat food such as beef, pork, bread, or beans. Now, how much fun is that going to be? And get this. We're also not supposed to not only drink alcohol, but we shouldn't even drink tea or coffee, drinking only water instead. So what they're really saying is these foods have contaminated our ability to think well. If you talk to any nutritionist today, they'll verify that. And if you want to live the vision of your ancestors, you have to have the kind of physical, mental, and spiritual capacity to do that. And what they're saying is, there's no foods like the old foods. That's what will free you. So, and he also said we have to stop hunting with a gun. Killing an animal with a gun depletes its spiritual energy, so we have to start using a bow and arrow again. However, keep the gun, because with that, you can kill white people. So I got a couple of them hanging up my house just in case another preacher comes by my door. And he said this is a quote, any red woman who is living with a white man must return to her people. She must believe her children with her husband, and so that all nations have pure blood. So any of you married to a non-native and are tired of them, use this as your excuse to go back home. Sorry, I got to fulfill my spiritual destiny. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, you get to keep the kids too. So they said the French and the Spanish and the British are all right, but the Americans, sorry Alan, the Americans come from the slime of the sea. It's right outside of Santa Barbara. And they come up with these claws. They're like this big kind of crayfish serpent. They go around grabbing everything that they see and eat it up. So squash the crayfish. It is the wish of the Great Spirit that we have no more commerce with the white man. Oh man, that's going to really hurt our cigarette sales, but let's forget that one for now. American culture, British culture, Canadian culture has a habit, again, kind of sanitizing history and producing art that then memorializes something, but we're not quite sure. So in this painting here from 1851, we see Tecumseh talking to William Henry Harrison, looking very much like the noble leader that he probably was, but it's the drama of the moment they're capturing. Historians will still argue about the accuracy of the words that have been translated at these meetings, so you have to be careful of looking at that. But the fact is, he was trying to negotiate a future. Let's take a look at his vision. If this is our job here, he said, the annihilation of our people is at hand unless we unite in a common cause against the common foe. So, who is the common foe today? We have to be clear about that. To defend our homes and our lands that were given to us by the Great Spirit, protect the graves of our dead, and protect our way of life. And no one nation has the right to sell land. Well, that's going to be tough in today's modern politics. where each of us feel this is our territory, this is our Aboriginal right, this is our land, and we'll negotiate on that. Tecumseh's vision was, it's all one land. We're all one people on that land, so we have to communicate with each other to keep that common bond going. When our blood is shed, we have to make atonement, whether right or wrong. We cannot let any transgression against any one of us go unattended to. We have to seek justice on all of these matters. This was a medal that was produced in 1822, but I'm not sure who produced it. And his nose was cut off only because it was soft metal. It says, no treaty will keep the whites out of our land. Boy, haven't we learned that? After all of the treaties we signed, hundreds of them, it never stopped. So maybe we have to be careful when we say we want the government to uphold the treaty, because the treaty is nothing more than a receipt for land that they've taken. So maybe we need another kind of discussion. Let us form one body, one heart, and defend to the last warrior our land. We will win our land, our country back from the fight. That's what you'd hope. We unite together, fight them, we can defeat them. And you got to remember, there were some examples of where that was true in the 1790s, where Little Turtle and the other native nations in the same territory defeated the United States in two of the biggest losses they ever suffered. So there was a real possibility that a united native nations could be a great power. And that's what I have to say about whites. Again, they're poisonous serpents. They sting the benefactors to death. They wish to kill our old women and men. You can imagine that if you're a young guy hearing all of this stuff, man, you're going to want to go out and fight. Nothing will satisfy them but the whole of our hunting lands. The white men despise and cheat the Indians. I still hear some of that from our politicians in Ottawa. These are the wampum strings that I'm talking about, I believe, because the Haudenosaunee believe, the words that Tecumseh said, and the feelings that he had, and his power is put into those beads. If he held those beads when he talked, his vision rests right over there. And maybe you should find a way for your people to find the right-minded young people, get together with your seers or whatever, and if we have to retouch that wampum again, because there it is. It's just sitting there waiting for us. It was interesting, another set of wampum strings you see here, those Dawa strings are very similar. And I believe Tecumseh's message was tied to this earlier one, put into this wampum so that we will never forget. It's still there from all of our nations, we just have to recover the wampum. So let's make sure that guy leaves with one less wampum string. Also, the Tecumseh, there's this wampum belt down in Washington. They still argue about whether it was Tecumseh or not, but for when it was first acquired near Chatham, they said that represented Tecumseh and the other native leaders. And in the center, it's very interesting, they're holding this flag. And it kind of intrigued me, because the assumption was it was the British flag. And if we know anything that's happened lately, apparently Tecumseh had a whole bunch of flags, a whole bunch of British flags. They kept giving them these flags, because the feeling back then was, if the native nation rises your flag, your allies' flag over their turf, it's a one way of showing your domain, your dominion over them. The blue flag is the one we restored from the Smithsonian for the exhibition we had, and I guess it's just two different flags, the red flag and the blue one. One represents what they call a naval flag, and the other is the land forces. But I don't believe that Tecumseh took these to say, now I'm a loyal ally to the crown, to the flag. It's just, okay, if you want to give me a flag, you want to give me another flag, you want to give me a flag, but how about some guns? So, I find this one particularly mysterious, if not a little insulting. It's at the Canadian Memorial Church in Vancouver, made in 1928. And now there's Tecumseh waving that flag, and the quote is, Tecumseh attests his loyalty to the British flag. Well, I can tell you, and I'm sure the historians agree, that never happened. He never did that. But so why are we doing this and trying to elevate him to this status? We make a caricature, and I'm sure he wouldn't like that. And more ironic, he's become a hero to both countries, both the United States and to Canada. You can always tell that because of the hokey books that they write or the little toys they make. In this case, we see the heroes of the West. There's Tecumseh, made in 1995, or the Canadian Hero Series. We see him in this book written in 1912. This is the only image I could find in time that actually came from England. It was made in 1973. They called Tecumseh the Red Napoleon, America's greatest Indian leader. And he was the panther lying in wait. And there isn't a whole lot of celebration of the War of 1812 in England, and very little mention about their native allies. And the killing of Tecumseh was also a great emotional victory for the Americans. If you go down to the Congress building and the rotunda, all around are the images of important events in their history, and this is one of them, that the killing of Tecumseh became a symbol of their land. This is the only commemorative coin I could find that talks about Tecumseh and his brother, and this was made in 1961, talking about the Battle of Tippecanoe. So we see the American officer on horseback shooting down the native, which is the same kind of scene that we see at the Battle of the Thames. So historical image remaking is the way to tell the story, because there wasn't too many eyewitness artists there, but that's where you have to be careful. It's like, there's almost like a script as to how this war is going to be described later. And this is the image on the other side of the coin, where we see Tecumseh and his brother. His brother is trying to explain the premature attack on the Americans and then what happened to that. Apparently, when you get killed in battle, you become thinner, stronger, more handsome, and kind of Greco-Roman-like. So this was a monument put up to Brock when he fell at Queenston Heights. And we have this forlorn, nearly naked man with the world's largest war club, by the way, kind of saying, okay, now what am I going to do? But compare that image to that of Tecumseh. And I put this quote there because it just seems so ironic. I am the maker of my own destiny, is what Tecumseh said. So, was that his destiny to be shot and killed on that day? Was it British betrayal that led to his demise? What was his destiny? And this image of the dying Tecumseh used to be in the Capitol building down in Washington. On his chest, ironically, they engraved this image of a serpent. And you can barely see it, but there's supposed to be a bullet hole in his head. This is the way the Smithsonian Magazine described it in 1995, well before all of the 1812 hoopla started. The subject is reclined, heroically proportioned man whose dignified and noble demeanor is unaffected by the bullet hole in his right temple. I doubt that very much. So he goes on as if he looks like these classical champions, and there was some need to romanticize the hero, even though we know that Tecumseh's body was probably mutilated on the battlefield. And suddenly we forget that, we transpose that into this hero-like status. But look at this. No one else of Tecumseh's race, and few of any other, have had such a powerful and abiding impact on the collective American imagination. Why are they so fascinated by the man that they killed? And in fact, in 1836, Richard Johnson ran for the U.S. Vice President, and his campaign slogan is "Rumpsy Dumpsy, Rumpsy Dumpsy, Colonel Johnson killed Tecumseh." And he won because he became a hero, even though our historians will explain, we're not sure he did. But he took that on his persona, puts it in his campaign, off he rides to Washington. If you go to the U.S. Naval Academy in Bethesda, Maryland, you're going to see this painted statue there. Whenever the United States goes to war, whenever Navy plays Army in football, or whenever there's final exams, and they go by this statue and they give him a left-handed salute, they throw pennies at it because they think it's Tecumseh, and somehow they're drawing upon his power to help them out. And every class paints it up differently. Well, it turns out it really wasn't Tecumseh in the beginning. It was this other Chief Tammany who was Delaware back in the 1600s. They turned him into kind of a noble, almost a patron saint of the American military, and now in the Naval Academy they decorate that. I'm not too sure how Tecumseh would feel about that, even if it's a misnomer. But this is why they yell Geronimo when they jump out of a plane, not Obama. There was a film out recently called Active Valor. Anybody see this movie? Good. The Active Valor just came out last year. It's about American servicemen. It's based upon a true story. They go overseas and of course are victorious. But it ends with Tecumseh's words scrolling on the scene. So even the American soldier has adopted this persona. Live your life to full, no fear of death, and all that stuff you want a soldier to believe, to give up their life. When it comes your time to die, be like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death. Talk about an inspirational speech given by the man who your army killed is a little freaky. But freaky things happen. And in the Canadian military, they adopted our names for the Queen's ships, including the Tecumseh, as you can see here, the Creeping Panther, or the Iroquois, the Cuga, and there's a whole bunch of them that they use. And I think we need to think about this. Why are we tied with the military, not with the peacekeepers? why are we seen as warriors, not as those who make peace? Because, you know, we lived at more days in peace than we ever did with war. I'm going to hurry up very quickly. He's giving me the eyeball. Okay, so these are the two most recent images I could find at Tecumseh, and I tell you, I just couldn't find some satisfaction in either one of them. One is a painting done for the Canadian War Museum, and it just, I don't know, there's something about that that just looks a little weird. But look at the other one. Chief Tecumseh, that's actually in a bar in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The true reason why we fought alongside the British is so that we can enjoy some beer afterwards. And they call it the Angel in Red. You guys might want to go there and do something about that. Oh, I thought I had a vision of Tecumseh one day. I was in a hotel room, and I heard the earth rumbling, and I heard water splashing. I went running to the window, and there he was. Well, actually, it was a ship called Tecumseh, but it was close enough for me. Now, we got to remember, because of those visions and the things they looked for, some of our behaviors don't match those. Here's a guy who's considered a hero of the War of 1812, and he was very heroic. John Smoke Johnson, he fought in every battle on behalf of the British. He was awarded with a special medal, but ironically, he's one of the guys in 1841 that signs away all of our land, the very thing that Tecumseh was against. So he's fighting in the war, ends up being an agent for the British, doing the same thing that we were fighting against. So that's what we got to be careful about. And what are we actually honoring and looking at this commemoration of the War of 1812? As you know, you mentioned the Treaty of Ghent, the things that was supposed to be guaranteed to us, our possessions, our rights, and our privileges. Well, guess what? 2015 is coming, the 200th anniversary of that treaty, and we have a full right, a blood-earned right, to ask both the United States and Canada and Great Britain, now, what does that mean in 2015? What about our possessions, our rights, and our privileges? And now let's talk about it as allies. Because as we know, there's a lot of rust that's grown on this great covenant chain that used to bind our nations together. We've held it hard, we've polished it as best we could, but now they have to do their share. Otherwise, I just think we become just colorful stage props in their photo op. So we see the Prime Minister applauding a native, and he apologized for what residential schools. We see Obama trying to struggle to put the headdress on this old chief, Cheyenne chief. And that's actually my niece dancing in front of the Queen when she visited people out in Newfoundland. But there's never a discussion about what does it mean to be allies as we go into the 21st century. It's all about how good it used to be. Well, we have to change that. And unfortunately, some of the reenactments that have taken place are just quite silly, like this one here, 2013 at Fort Mims. And people all gathered together, even got their babies in there, and they got their people pretending they're natives, and everybody's smiling and screaming at the same time. It looks more like a hippie fest back from 1968. But I worry about this because it somehow perpetuates that negativity of the fierce warrior. Imagine what that little baby is screaming in that mother's hands is going to think about us because of this memory. So we have to think more carefully about that. And I'll end with this picture here. This is a picture I took of my daughter a couple years ago. I took her to the Haldeman Monument. It talks about how when we got our land in 1784. I told her the story of these wampum belts, the Covenant Chain belt and the Truro belt. And I asked if I could take her picture. And you know, kids, they usually really ham it up, you know, they stick their tongue out and everything else. And she was born at home by the midwives, not in the hospital. And she's trying hard to learn the ceremonies and all of the things that we're supposed to be doing. That's what they were talking about. Not a political fight or legal fight, but it's really a fight for the hearts and minds of our young people, that they will want to remain the kind of people that stood with Tecumseh. And I think ultimately, to rekindle his vision, it's to make strong children who believe in themselves as what we call the Ohsweken, the original people of this land. So I appreciate this time we had to share a few moments with you. Thank you very much.